Okay, well, welcome to this webinar. We're going to be talking about optimizing your woodworking with comprehensive grain control. So grain control is a new feature that we've added in Arrange and Nesting Fabrication. It allows you to control the direction of the parts, the orientation inside of the material so that you can match the grain with what you want it to be. And move on here. So what we're going to be talking about, we're going to introduce ourselves, Spencer and I. We're going to talk about nest preparation, so selecting the entities that you're going to be including in a nest, the materials library, so the sheets that you're going to be creating the parts from, including like multiple sheets and things like that. Component sources, so tying together the nest preparation materials to show what you're going to be actually nesting, and then finally the nest study itself. And who am I? I am CJ Abraham. I've been working for Autodesk for 8.5 years. I've previously been an intern at Autodesk, and I also spent a number of years in the product management organization working on Fusion manufacturing. And I am currently a technical marketing manager for Fusion 360. And I'll pass it over to Spencer to introduce himself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Spencer Hardcastle. My current role is I manage a small team of customer advocates, which in a nutshell basically tries to bring the customer close to the development decisions we're making sure that the customers are at the forefront of the decisions we're making in terms of product development. In a previous life, I joined Autodesk through the acquisition of a company called Cad Cam. I've been working at the company for around 7 to 8, coming up to 8 years. And I've had previous positions. I started on the graduate scheme. I was an applications engineer in the support teams for a while. And then I've held roles in both product and process specialists, doing a similar thing. But yeah, very recently took on a team and absolutely loving it. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll pass back to CJ.
Cool. Thanks, Spencer. Honored to be sharing this webinar with you. All right. So the Nesting and Fabrication Extension is an add-on to Fusion Core. So why would you want to use the extension? So use all of your design and manufacturing tools in one platform. One continuous workflow from design to manufacturing instead of multiple disconnected products or workflows, right? You can improve your operational efficiency with automated and optimized workflows across your teams. It's a collaborative tool as well. You all log in, work on the same project, and have all those tools at your disposal. And it reduces your time to market by just streamlining the whole process instead of dealing with all of the other tools. Just have it all in one place. And with the extension specifically, you can have flexible access. So subscribe by day, month, or year based on your needs. And with the Nesting and Fabrication Extension specifically, you have automated part layout and multi-part nesting. So we're going to take a demo set and show you multiple materials all at once, and have it all laid out all at once. It's going to be pretty neat. Reduce your costs. So optimize your material yield. So get as many parts as you can into one sheet. Reduce your costs. And minimize rework. So when you're going through the design process and manufacturing, it's not necessarily tossing it over the wall. You're going back and forth. So manufacturing changes drive design changes, and vice versa. So being able to have all of that in one place minimizes the amount of scrap and rework you go through. And we're going to move over to the demonstration now. So I'm going to open up Fusion 360. And now we should be looking at Fusion 360. Can you confirm that for me, Spencer?
Confirmed. We've got Fusion.
Okay, excellent. So what we have here is a parametric cabinet. So we can go up into the parameters here, and I'm going to make some changes to demonstrate maybe like a design process where you're figuring out what you want to do. I have some favorite parameters, which are like overall dimensions. So I'm going to change. Let's change the width to 60 inches, the depth to 24 inches, and you can see the model updating behind this dialog here. And overall height, let's do 36 inches. All right, so we're starting to get something interesting here, and I'm going to add one more drawer instead of 4 drawers. I want 5 drawers. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. So we've had all these changes, right? So building a parametric piece of furniture is actually kind of fun. And in order to create our nest, first thing we need to go to is utilities, nest, and nest preparation. Okay, so it's going to do some automatic selections for us. And this model is organized into some components and subassemblies and such. For example, I have this frame subassembly, and it contains parts like the top, bottom, middle, right, left, back cover. And all these parts are, some of them are similar materials, but maybe different thicknesses. Other parts are different materials entirely, like the runners for the drawers. Okay, so you'll see the different materials. We'll get to that in a moment. But what the nest preparation dialog does is tells Fusion which entities we want to include in a nest study. Okay. Oh, and also, almost forgot, the nest preparation step is the first place where we can control the grain direction. So if I look at a particular component like the drawer front, okay, so it's isolated just the copies of the drawer front there, I can control with this handle the direction that I want the grain to be. So it starts off at a default of 0, which is aligned to the x-axis. And I can put in a value like 45 degrees. Okay, pretty simple. And the advantage of doing it with this dialog is that if you use this data set in other places to do your nest, that grain control will carry over with it. Okay. Any questions so far that we need to answer?
No, none yet. I guess what I would add maybe is that if you look at the component types, we can take in, I think you mentioned already, to be fair, the sheet metal flat patterns. So if you're designing in sheet metal specifically, then it's going to go ahead and flatten those out. You do need to have the flat pattern already created in design for it to pick it up, but it will take that flat pattern and nest it. Regular components, as we're seeing here, these are wood components in this case, or sketches. So if you have maybe a bunch of DXFs or some sort of flat geometry in form of sketches, then we can also nest that too.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so before we move over to manufacture, let's take a look at some of the materials that were used in this cabinet. I will hide the front door here so you can see there's some frame components. So the top, bottom, right, left, middle, and the shelves are all a particular thickness of material. If I isolate a drawer, the materials used for this drawer are another thickness that is thinner than the frame components. And then this final panel on the bottom drawer here, that's another material entirely, right? So I'm using oak, 1-inch thick oak, 1/2-inch thick oak. This veneer is 1/8 inch. Also on the drawer here, you'll see some runner components. These are going to be steel. And finally, if I unisolate the drawer, show all components and bodies. On the back, there is a full oak panel that's 1/8. Right, so we have lots of material thicknesses. We can mix and match more materials if we wanted to, but this is what we're going to stick with. And again, we've done our nest preparation, so now we're going to go over to manufacture. Go to the fabrication tab, and we will first look at the process material library. So these are the materials that were identified by Fusion. These were physical materials that I applied to those components in the design workspace, and it carried over into the manufacturer workspace. If we go over to packaging, you can see I've used some standard sizes for all of these sheets. So I'm just using 96 by 48 inches for each one. And you would put in what material sizes you actually use in your operations. You can also put in costs for each one. And this is helpful if you're trying to optimize for cost. So say that you have access to different size sheets or different thickness sheets, or you want to do a study over lots of materials to see what's the cheapest for you, or basically optimize over cost. There's an option to do that. Okay, and you can see that the thicknesses have also been pulled from those materials. So I was using 1 inch and 1/2 inch thick oak, and that's what it determined it was going to use in these materials as well. Okay. Spencer, was there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you summed it up really, really well. One thing I would say is that you're not limited to one packaging for one material. It's not a one-to-one thing here. So you can have and define a material like CJ's got there. He's got the 1 inch thick oak, right? But you might, in your shop or in your factory there, you might have 3, 4, maybe even 5 different sheet sizes available to you, all at a different cost, of course. And so by having more than one thickness and by having more than one packaging size, it's going to allow you to not only create different nest studies with different packaging sizes to really associate costs, or you could actually let Fusion decide which is the most beneficial for you to minimize the waste. And there's different packaging algorithms that work behind the scenes to do that for you. So you can let Fusion do all the work, just calculate which one's the cheapest, which one uses the less material, and away you go. And it's going to take into account remnants and things like that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so we've got our materials. And we've completed the first 2 steps of the nest process, right? We defined what entities we've got in nest preparation. We've got our materials. So now we're going to go look at component sources. And this is where you can see the mixing of the two, right? What the result is likely to be. And there's a few more settings we can change here as well. So if I click on a component like this top, we get a couple of settings. We get a preview of the grain direction of the sheet versus the component. And we can also change some of those settings here too. So for example, let's say that I wanted to take the drawer front, right? Right now the grain direction is 0. I'd like to change that to 45. Okay, so we get a live preview in this dialog here. And all of the drawer panels for the drawer front have been changed to that 45-degree angle. So if I look through the list here and click on different ones, it shows me that. We can pick another component to do for, let's do that bottom panel as well. So I'm going to change the bottom panel to be 45 degrees instead of that material. Okay, so we've got a mix of 45 degrees and 0 degrees. I'm satisfied with that. I'll click OK. And this is where we actually begin the nest study. So I'm going to click Create Nest Study. If I look at the packaging materials, it's using all of the materials that we've defined. And the output, I want to include stock because we're going to be making a manufacturing setup out of this. And that's it. So I'm going to click OK. And it generates a nest study. And you can see we already get some results here. First off this is the steel sheet for those runners. So it's nested the runners into that sheet of material and used as little as it could, right? So I started off with a big sheet. It only needed to use that small section in order to create all those parts. Next would be, this looks like the veneer panel. So this is the 1/8 thick panel that goes on the bottom of the drawer. And you can see it's set at a 45-degree angle inside of this material, just as we defined. And when there is not enough room to include all of the components, it just adds another sheet. Right, so only 3 could fit in the first one. It couldn't fit the next one, so it included another component in there, or another sheet to get that component. Next, we have the 1/2 inch thick material for the drawers. And you can see most of the components left it at 0 degrees, but the drawer front panels were at a 45-degree angle. And again, to include all the components that needed to add another sheet. So from this study, I can say that, well, maybe instead of buying 96-inch long sheets, I'll buy shorter ones, or I'll just buy one big piece of material, right? So this gives you a way to see what the result's going to be. and regenerate that if you needed to. Moving on to the thickest panel of oak, we have the frame components. This was broken up into 3 panels or 3 sheets. And then finally, that rear 1/8 thick oak panel. Right. So we've got all these sheets with all of the parts that we want. I'm going to control select all the sheets for the 1-inch thick oak. I'll right click and create setups for manufacturing model. And so this creates the setups that I can use to begin programming on top of this nest study, right? So I'll go ahead and use the 2D profile, select a tool. Let's go ahead and create one. Let's use, we're going to assume this is a router. So flat end mill, maybe something like a down cutting end mill. And I'm just going to use something small. Just as an example. And then I can select the top face of one of these components, turn on the checkbox for select same plane, it selects all the components. Toolpath's not supported. I need to change a tool. Oh, I see what I did. I used a milling tool instead of a cutting tool. Let's use a laser. If I wanted to use a milling tool on a router, I'd have to use 2D contour. That was my bad. Okay, and there's a toolpath, right? So pretty quick to go from design all the way to a usable toolpath with a efficient nest study. Were there any other questions that we need to answer there?
Yeah, we got a couple of questions coming. The first one's an interesting one, right? And we could probably talk for an hour on this, just this question, but is there a way to set a default set of parameters in Fusion 360? Maybe you might be talking about the design parameters, you might be talking about manufacturing parameters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I can tell you that for manufacturing parameters, you absolutely can. So like in one of these operations, for example, finishing overlap, we have this new 3-dot menu that makes this more discoverable, but I can edit the expression, right? So I could say I always want a 100,000 overlap. Let's do 1 inch. And then once that has been set, I can click the 3-dot menu and save as user default. I think it might be getting clipped. I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but save as user default will create that default or set it as default. So every time you open this operation, that value will already be there. So that's an example for manufacturing.
Perfect. And then I had a couple of other questions, or one other question. Is there a component, if there's a component that you don't like the direction of, so you've nested it, the direction's out a little bit, how do you change that? So how do you go to edit something that's already nested, I guess?
Well, I suppose an easy way to do that would be to go to component sources, pick the component. So let's say that, let's pick one that actually fits. Let's do a shelf. Right, so what if I wanted these shelves to be 30 degrees, for example? Okay, so now I've set those shelves to 30 degrees, click OK. So this nesting study is now invalidated, so I'm going to generate. And let's see if I can get this, maybe this one needs to be edited. Perhaps I'll need to create a new nest study for that, but that's how it would be done. Is you would go up to sources, or you would go back to the nest preparation, and you would just update the direction to whatever you want it to be there.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I mean, component source is probably the easiest way to do it, right? Jump in there, you change it. The thing about component sources is it's going to change every nest study. So if you've got 3 nest studies in there, is going to go ahead and change all three of those nest studies that are using that particular component. You can go in and change it on the nest level and edit a component grain that way. But just note that if you go ahead and then regenerate any point, maybe design changes, maybe you change another parameter you need to regenerate, those changes on the nest level, they're going to be overwritten, because effectively what you're doing is you're just making micro changes right at the end of the process. There's like a hierarchy of changes that you make, starting all the way back at nest preparation and ending at modifying the nest with component sources there in the middle. Couple other questions coming in. Are the part positions automatically being adjusted to compensate for kerf? Yeah, they are. So in the material library, there's some nesting defaults saved to the materials themselves. One of those is part separation. So you'll choose on a material, so an oak or a steel or whatever it might be, you choose a part separation. And there's some other parameters in there too, things like, global parameters, there you go. So you got frame width, you got item separation, things like that. And they can be changed on the nest level like you do in here, but that's just going to be for that one nest. Or you can do it in the material library, and that's going to change your defaults for everything. So every time you use that material, it's going to use that now updated item and item separation and frame width.
Okay.
Fixturing, another question, sorry, CJ came in. How does fixturing work? So again, in the material library, in the nesting area, you can do adjustments. It's an adjustment to the frame width on either the left, the right, the top, or the bottom. That's all we can do, rather than specific areas where your clamps or fixturings are. It's just going to be an offset from a particular side. And we already answered Dean's question. How do you adjust the space between the components? Perfect.
All righty. If there's no other questions, we could go back to the PowerPoint because the demonstration's over.
Yeah, there's one more. Is there a way to do a default library of materials for nesting?
Oh yeah, that's more or less what this is, right? You define the materials that you use as an organization, and then your nests will be generated out of those lists of materials.
That's absolutely right. And it's saved in your assets folder, right? And so that's Fusion uses the cloud as a state model. And so when you create your material library, you can save that as a preset to your assets folder. Now, everybody that's using that same team environment, that same hub, can then adopt those materials. So effectively what you can do is you can take the expertise of one individual and share that expertise around that everybody else that's working in your company or business. So again, power of the cloud and leveraging the assets folder to share that information across your colleagues. Hope that answers all the questions. Let us know in the chat if not, or if you've got any further ones. And back to CJ.
Okay, we should be looking back at the PowerPoint. And so just to recap, we looked at a effectively automated workflow going through from the design all the way to the tool pathing step, right? I had very little input on actually creating the nest. It was just a few clicks, to be honest. And we got to also see that it was nesting multiple materials. So you can have your whole design, nest everything from it that you would like to. Minimizing, reducing costs and minimizing rework. You saw that we were trying to fit as many parts into a sheet as possible. If we needed another sheet, it would add it, but visualizing it in that way gives you a chance to figure out what works best for you. And the integrated Cad Cam benefits are just incredible. Tool pathing right on top of the nest study that you did. Maybe going back and changing some of the parametrics, like changing the size of the components that we were using, and just going right back to toolpath. Some of the benefits and capabilities of the nesting and fabrication extension as a whole. So like estimating part production costs. So you saw that we entered the cost of the material into the materials library. So that's another benefit, is that when you're doing these things, you immediately see the cost. It's easy for beginners and experts alike. I'm a self-proclaimed beginner in the nesting and fabrication extension, right? And it was pretty easy for me to go through this process and get it done. But if you have an expert like Spencer, you can get in and change all the settings that you want and have all the fine control and really come up with something interesting and efficient for your business. Capabilities, fast and easy. Yeah, especially the multi-sheet nest generation. Like I said, when I created that model, I used the physical materials and the material library adapted around that. But it just shows that seamless integration from beginning to end. Comprehensive nesting reports. So if we wanted to really dive deep into all the nesting results, we could look at over all the reports and results and see the different data about each generated result there, and really pick something good. Spencer, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you summed it up really well. The reports are HTML, so you can go in there and customize them, add your own company logos, things like that. We've also recently implemented sticky labels. So often in furniture and in those types of industries, you're making a lot of rectangular shapes. You need to know which rectangular shape is which rectangular shape. And we have automatically generated sticky labels now. So you can use things like a normal paper printer or even a dedicated label printer. Print those directly as you're creating your report. Put them on the parts as they're being cut, and then you can track them around a lot easier. We've even had customers throw things like QR codes on there too, so they can link directly to their material and order tracking system. So it does provide that level of added flexibility for sure.
All right, excellent. And the viewers of this webinar get to experience a free trial of the Nesting and Fabrication Extension. So you can use the link or use the QR code, and you'll get a 7-day trial, is it?
That's right, 7 days, unlimited access, make as many nests, create as many setups as you want. And then after those 7 days, you have the option to purchase daily, if you'd rather consume as and when, monthly, for a little bit longer period, or of course annually. Either of those options are available to you after free trial. So go ahead, try it out, and let us know what you think on the forums and various places like that. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear about your experience with the technology included in the Nesting and Fabrication Extension.
Right, excellent. And then any final questions? Your opportunity before we wrap up this webinar.
We had one more question come in. Can you use nesting set same size individual parts? Can you use nesting to set same size individual? I'm not sure I quite understand the question. You can just elaborate a little bit in the chat what you mean there. You can absolutely change the quantity. So if you're looking to make, let's say, 4 of document A, 5 of document B, you can absolutely do that. I think I understand the question a little bit. Let me know if not in the chat. But so Fusion has the capability to choose which size sheet is the best, right? So if you've got various different packaging sizes of a single material, it can choose packaging A, packaging B, packaging C. Or you can control it, right? So you can just say only nest on packaging A because that's all I've got in at the moment, or all on packaging C. Or, like I said, you can let it automatically determine which is best based on the waste material, right? So it's minimizing the waste material and maximizing your yield. Hope that answers the question. Again, let us know in the chat if not. And like I was saying before, you can, perfect. You can change the quantities as well. So you can choose to do 5 of document A, 6 of document B, nest them together. You might get orders, right? You might get an order for 3 big wardrobes and 2 small chests of drawers or 3 bedside tables. Whatever that order is, you bring them in, you nest them together, and just let the nesting and fabrication extension take care of the rest. Alternatively, you can do it on a part-by-part basis. So you might be fulfilling an order and maybe something went wrong on a previous order and you just need 1 extra part or something. You absolutely have the flexibility to change that. I think that's the end of the questions. CJ, hand back over to you.
All right. Well, that's all, folks. That's the end of the webinar. Thanks for joining and thanks for the questions. And we hope you try the trial and find out that nesting and fabrication extension is right for you.